Hello everybody, welcome back to my studio. It's lovely to see you again here. It's a gorgeous day out there, but I'm very happy to be in here because it's a bit cooler and I've got lots of lovely colourful things to show you today. As I promised, I said I would do you a video on how to do free machine embroidery without using a hoop. So the first thing I'm going to show you is some samples that I've got here. These are just odds and sods that I've done down the years. I often do samples before I do a big piece so I can find out how the fabric's going to work, what they're going to do for me, and you know, how they're going to respond and what sort of stitching I want to do on them. So this first piece is just a stripy one, and it's got some satin on, and I've got some organza strips sewn on there as well to give it a bit of texture. It's got some velvet, and it's got some circles that I've put on here across there, and just some different colours going on there. And on the back you can actually see the stitching that I've done. Okay, so I've just been playing around. This is really just a little sample to try things out. But the fabrics I've got on are layered over the top of, there's a piece of calico at the base there, there's a piece of the wadding that I use, and that's made it reasonably stiff to actually put it under the machine and get it stitching. This piece I did a very long time ago, I think when I was a student, a very long time ago, when I was starting off a degree course in Carlisle. Goodness me, I was a much younger version of myself then, and I hadn't even had my daughter, so that shows you how long ago it was. Anyway, that's an aside. What I wanted to show you here was the amount of stitching. Now all of that looks like material, but it's actually all stitching. You know, when you do proper satin stitching for hand embroidery, it's very close work. I wanted to see if I could do it. It's not something I actually do nowadays because there's just so much heavy stitching involved. And on the back you can see the colour of the threads that were underneath. But I wanted to show you it just because when you do that amount of stitching, it really makes it stiff. So once you start sewing, it actually makes the fabric much stiffer and much easier to use. When you get a few sort of layers of stitching down, you can then work into it and work into it and work into it, and it just gets stiffer and easier to use. So that's a simple little, literally, I don't think I even put fabric underneath. I may have done. I think it was an orange background and I think I just stitched onto it. Anyway, this one is a very simple little landscape which I did for a bit of fun with some fun fabrics. This is bits of old jumper, I think, on the little tree heads here. And I wanted to show you, it's quite floppy this. This is just, I've used the top fabrics and I've put some wadding underneath like that, because I love the wadding. It makes it quite quilty, quite nice quilty effect. So you're not just sewing something that's really, really flat to start with. And again, if I show you on the back, you can see all the random free machine embroidery on the back. But I think for a beginner, I would want something a little bit stiffer underneath that. Okay, this one I was just going to show you again. I think I showed you this in a previous video. It's just wadding with the fabric on top, but because it's got quite a lot of stitching on it, by the time I finished it, it's quite stiff. It's a lot stiffer than that one, I would say. That one's really quite floppy. This one's got a stiffness to it, but that's because I've stitched it and stitched it, as you can see from the back. Okay. This one's a funny piece. Look at that. That's old blanket. Beautiful old green blanket on the back. It's got calico on the top, and then it's got layers. The coloured layers are actually underneath the calico, because this is called reverse applique, where you actually layer fabrics up and then you cut away the top layer. So you can see all the pretty colours underneath it. But I'm just showing you this because I've used a piece of old blanket as the stiffener. And there you can see, actually, you can see the coloured fabrics underneath there, and then the calico on top. So basically what you've got lying around will do. This piece, again, it's fairly stiff. You can hear that sort of sound that you get. I love that sound when you get lots of stitching going on. I think it's just wadding with the fabrics on top, and then as I've stitched and stitched, it's got stiffer and stiffer to make it easier to actually stitch. You can see all the stitching on the back probably more clearly than on the front. I've got some circles going on there, and I've done some cutaway again. There's some velvet underneath, some organza there, and I've also done some free machine dots here, where I've just gone from dot to dot and cut the thread, so you get these little bits sticking up. That's a bit where I've cut away some velvet as well, which is quite fun to do. This piece is quite a simple one. This is just stripes, and I've just done lots of different stitching on it. It's done, I think, oh, I know, it's done on a piece of felt, an actual piece of cotton felt or wool felt, quite thin. So actually that made quite a stiff piece as well. I wasn't really thinking about that. And that's the back. You can see all the stitching on the back, and you can see all the just simple lines of just fiddling about with different stitches. If you've got, I know it's not free machining, but I was going to say you could actually just use some of your pre-designed stitches on something like that. So that's the colourful bits done. This is what's underneath. This is the underwear. This is the corset department and the underwear department of the free machining that I do. So we've got a piece of calico or cotton, whatever you've got, polycotton, it could be cotton, it could be a piece of sheeting, whatever you've got in. This is my secret weapon. This is curtain interlining, which is really cheap as chips. When I used to do quilting, this is what I used to make my quilted layers with, because I was a bit of a skinflint and I wouldn't pay the proper prices for things that I was just going to hang on the wall. This is not really for, I wouldn't use it if I was making a quilt for the bed, but for the work I was doing that was going to hang on a wall, then this is what I would use. And so I put the calico with that, and with some coloured fabrics on top. That would almost be enough, but I would add the other top secret thing, which is a piece of stabiliser. I know it sounds like something on your bicycle, doesn't it, when you set off learning to ride a bike. It's the posh term, technical term is stabiliser. This is something called Stitch and Tear, which I've shown you before. I really like it because it's fairly inexpensive and it's just stiff enough to go underneath those two layers there. And when you kind of pin it together, and you can add your coloured fabrics on top. You know, if you're going to cover it with fabric, that's great. Or if you just want to be adding, you know, highlights that you're going to embroider around, that's fine as well. And that just gives you something that you can then hold and free machine, and you can move it around while the machine does the stitching through the layers like that. So it's not as robust as a hoop, but it gives you much greater freedom because you can actually start to use bigger pieces of fabric. But I would start with a small sample just to get you going, like that sort of size. The other thing, as I showed you before, is a piece of old blanket. So I've got a piece of blanket here, and I would put the calico on top of that, plus my fabrics that I'm going to use. Unless, of course, you're using really stiff fabrics on the top. If you've got some quite stiff cottons that you're going to put on top, then by all means, you know, you may not need the calico either. So I think what I'm going to do next, part 3 of this little beginning part of the video, before we get to the machining. These are just some strips that I've cut of lots of different, I don't know what you call it, lining fabrics really. And I just wanted to do something really colourful, fairly simple. So I'm going to pin these on here. I'm just going to pin them on, and then I will do some free machining. But what I might do, when you're first starting off, what you can do is just, I'm just trying to see what I can see to show you. You could actually use your normal presser foot to hold those in place, but I would work from one end all the way down if you're going to do that, and leave, what would I do? Let's just have a think about this. Let's pin that one on there. So this is very much have a go and see what happens with this. I forget what I'm teaching sometimes, so I just kind of, because I do it in a particular way myself, when I'm teaching it, it has to be so that you can learn to do it as well. Let's just take those off there, keep it simple. So if you were to put 2 pieces on like that, I would stitch along the top of there, then pin that one on and stitch along the top of that, and then I would do my free machine embroidery into that section there, and I'd do my free machine embroidery onto that section there, and then I would put my next colour on, so that you don't get it all bunched up, because if you stitch the top of that and the top of that, the fabric will bunch up, which you might want. You might be quite happy with that, because fabric will always move unless you stick it down with a fusible webbing like Bondweb. The fabric will move, and for me that's part of the joy of the free machining, is your fabric moves and adjusts according to your stitching. So I think what we'll do is I will get my machine next, I'll put the camera down, and we will just have a go at doing some free machine, free machine embroidery. So back in a second with the camera in the right place, I hope. Right, okay, so I've set the machine up, and all I've done so far is put down a single strip, which I have pinned. I've just taken the pins out of that bit because I've sewn that end there, and I've got it pinned at this end so that it'll keep it as flat as possible. And I'm just going to let the machine do the free machine embroidery. I've actually, I don't know if you can see, I've kind of folded this piece over it, so I've got a smaller piece to hold on to. And I'm just going to let the machine do the sewing, and I'm going to move the fabric through the machine. I'm just doing some very simple sort of waggly lines, and because I've got the pins going sideways, I'm quite happy to stitch over them. Obviously that carries a risk, so you know, if you feel like doing that, that's fine. That's what I've chosen to do. I've actually turned it round there just because I thought then you can see this bit I've got folded up and I'm holding on to it. Roll back. So that's going to hold it in place, and I can always come back to it. I'm going to take the pins out. I can always come back to it and do some more on that when I've moved forward. So I'm going to just pull the machine, take the needle out, snip that, and I'm going to put the next piece on to sew. So just bear with while I just do that. Okay, so you can see I've put a second strip of the fabric on now, and I've just pinned it very simply going down like that. I'm going to put my presser foot down, because as you know with free machine embroidery you must put your presser foot down, even though the fabric can now move around as much as I want it to. You must have your presser foot down, otherwise your stitching will just knit up underneath. I've kept the same colour thread on just because for simplicity for showing you this, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little stitch down that edge. It could be straight stitch. I think for simplicity I'll just make that a straight stitch. And as I say, you could do that with just your normal foot on if you want to. It's fairly easy to do it with your free machining. And the more you do your free machining, the better you'll get at it. So, I'm just going to do some simple waggles again. I'm just going to do the same sort of waggles actually for this one. I've just really, what I'm trying to do really is just get the fabric held down in place so that I can then do some more fancy free machining once I've got it all in place. So I think you can see how I'm going to build this up, and I'm going to put in, put another colour of fabric on there next, or perhaps put a blue piece on there next. So I'll show you that when I've got a bit more stitching done. Okay, so you can see I've got a lot more colours down now, and what I'm doing here is I'm just going to show you some squiggly free machine embroidery here. And I'm showing you with pink onto the orange so you can actually see the stitching out. And I'm just allowing the machine to do little simple circles, little tiny circles. I'm moving the fabric fairly slowly, and the machine is moving fairly quickly, and that allows you just to create these little circles. It's really important that your machine goes fairly fast, because if you machine too slowly you get really jaggedy little circles. I'm going fairly speedily for this one, and I'm using a nice bright colour. And if you wanted more stitching than that, I don't know if you can see that, if I turn the light off you might be able to see that a bit better there, otherwise it's too shiny, isn't it? You could actually do another round of stitching on top of that if you wanted that to have more stitching on it. It's quite random, it's nothing it's not a set pattern or anything. I'm just letting the machine kind of do its thing, and I'm just waggling the fabric around, and the machine is doing a little pattern on it like that. Okay, so that's that one, and this one next to it, so I'll just turn the light off again and you can see, I think you can see what that's doing. And the next one to it, I'm just going to do some little circles. So I'm doing a little bit of stitching and then a circle. And a little bit of stitching in a circle, a little bit of stitching in a circle, a little bit of stitching in a circle like that. And then you can see, I don't know if you can see from there, how wonky, this is pretty wonky. I'll go around the circle twice, And what happens is you're basically building up a pattern. And it's not particularly tidy, but it's just about filling in the space, it's about adding colour. And the more you do of it, the more fun it gets, as it were. So I've started at one side of the stripe. Oh, I think I've run out of thread underneath. Oh, disaster. Never mind, we'll stop there, because I think that's probably enough of that to show you for now. And I'll show you it more when I've finished it, okay? See you shortly. Okay, so that's that piece done. I've done a lot more stitching on it and had some fun. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, which way up it goes. You can see some of the colours there. I've done lots of different colours on it. If I show you the back, perhaps you can see some of the stitching is very simple, really. It's just little circles, pretty random, lots of squiggles, but it's very effective when you kind of put it all together. And because I've got lots of different colours going on with the stripes as well. It's a really nice way to make yourself a little sampler and have a go at some of the free machine embroidery. You could even, I reckon you could just even really frame that up quite nicely. You know, it's ready to go and hang on the wall. It's really pretty and very colourful. I did in the end use some different threads. I added some viscose threads into the mix because these are really nice and shiny, and I thought they went well with the colours that I've got going on the fabric. So that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying my videos as much as I'm enjoying making them, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.